Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Your Hero's Journey. And today we have a very special episode, or what I would like to call a bonus episode, where we break down all 5 interviews that we've done from the entirety of this season and give you guys essentially a high-level overview of all of the takeaways from all 5 episodes bundled into one. So the thought is that you'll walk away from this episode with a clear understanding of how to start a business within the food or culinary industry, because again, this season is focused only on food and culinary, although anything that you learn here, of course, you can apply to other businesses or other entrepreneurship endeavors that you're looking to take. As a reminder, Your Hero's Journey is not a podcast that is focused just on the tangible or strategic insights on how to build a business, but also the mental and the spiritual tactics of what it takes and the understanding and the wisdom of what it takes to ensure that you are not only building a successful business, but sustaining a successful business, and ensuring that you're getting the buy-in from your network and your community as well. Because in order to do that, it really takes true authenticity. So as a reminder, if you haven't watched all the episodes within this podcast, which I would highly encourage you to do, but if you haven't, I'll just give you a quick overview of the guests that we've had on this season thus far. Very special guests. So we've had Dan Sabia, who's trained under the world-renowned chef John Jors, worked in numerous Michelin star restaurants in New York City, who has now started his own very, very successful entrepreneurship business where he not only caters weddings, major events, but he also has his own restaurant up in upstate New York. We also have Stanley Lumax, who is not only a major executive at JP Morgan, but also is the founder of African Chop House, which is essentially a events company that provides spaces and curates spaces for the African diaspora. And he's also one of the co-founders of Teranga, which is a African restaurant up in Harlem, right across the street from Central Park within the African Center. We've also have Alex Hill, who is her own recipe maker and her own TV series host, or I should say digital content series host in her own right. And she is the owner of Just Add Hot Sauce, and she has so much great content where she has curated this space for women of color who are also on the move, hella productive, who need to have recipes that are not only quick, but obviously taste really good. The two don't always go hand in hand. So Alex has done a really good job of combining the two and has really done a great job of carving out her own space in the food content creation. We also have Midi, and Midi is one of my favorite episodes because it's really unconventional when it comes to the business models. He really operates off of the pre-order business models, and he rarely comes out of pocket for anything that he invests in. He doesn't like to take loans. He doesn't like to owe people money. So he's created the pre-order model, which I find super interesting and fascinating, and also the leasing model where he leases his food trucks with Ali Market within Chelsea. If you're familiar with Chelsea, very, very good neighborhood in New York City that a lot of people go to work in. And if you are familiar with the work rush within New York City, that is the perfect place to be for a new and upcoming business. So long story short, Midi has done a great, innovative job of ensuring that he's not coming out of pocket, but is always having profit coming in, whether he's splitting it or he's getting the full percentage. Last but certainly not least, we have Scotty of Las Lap, Linden LA, and LA. And Scotty has done a really great job of curating a community for people who look like us, not only in New York, but also in LA, which could be a little bit more challenging. It is also pretty challenging in New York too, because New York has so many spaces and it feels like such a saturated market. But Scotty has really done a good job of curating a vibe that has a unique time of place that normally most other businesses aren't operating, but also that family vibe where you come in and not only Scotty, but his staff also knows your name and makes you feel like family. And in a place where the hustle and bustle of New York can feel really overwhelming, it can feel so relieving and just like a place of peace to walk into somewhere that is a bar or a lounge and feel like you're at home. And Scotty has done that not only in New York, but also in LA. So I say that to say we have a great roster of interviewees to really get some really insightful analyses from, and I'm excited to share that with you guys in an overview But if there's anything that you want to dive deeper on, I'll be sure to mention where each of these tactics were derived from the episode so that you can always revert to the episode and do a deeper dive. So we'll be covering 7 important topics today, and these were the 7 overarching themes of what I personally gathered from these 5 episodes. First, we'll start with starting your business. Second, we'll start with the power of taking the first step and using the resources that you have available to you. The third, we will go into the importance of a brand. Fourth, we'll go into affordable or low-cost approaches to getting started within the culinary industry. 5, we'll go into creating value and or raising money. They are essentially one and the same. Ugh. 6, will go into the tactics of opening a brick and mortar and the different approaches that you can take to successfully opening a brick and mortar. And last but certainly not least, we will talk about the importance of being able to change and or pivot. So first, we're going to start with starting your business. Where do you even begin? A prime place to start is to identify a problem, particularly and ideally a problem within your community that you are a part of. And the reason that this is so important is because when you are a part of a community, you have insight into the nuances that people are dealing with, something that can already exist but may need elevation, may need improvements, or it may have a gap in the market. And when you are solving for a particular problem, you are not only just creating a dope idea or a dope business, but you're actually giving the people something that they need. And when you create a need or create a craveability that allows you to not only start and launch a successful business, but also ensure that it could be sustained, because you know that there's always going to be a demand for this versus you having to create that value out of thin air. Now, we have many opportunities of this throughout our season. Midi did this with the chopped cheese. And before he started Shmackwich, you can only get a chopped cheese in any of the bodegas. Now, Midi realized that, one, this is something that people want access to, not just within a bodega, but what if I'm sitting down and I'm craving a chopped cheese at a restaurant that I want to go out to my friends, but I don't want to go out to a bodega. We want to sit down and have a conversation. There's a way that he created his own product, a very elevated product of something that already existed, and then collabed with restaurants to bring it into those restaurants and into those tables so that he was meeting his audience where they were. And that's another very essential part too, because let's admit it, we all love convenience. We all want to be met where we already are, whether that's digitally. If I'm only on Instagram, I don't want you to market to me on Facebook. Or if I'm already going to restaurants, I don't want you to try to get me to go to a bodega. Meet people where they already are in their habits, because it's really hard to change a person. So you might as well meet them where they are and create that direct consumer journey to your product. Now, we also saw this with Stanley. Stanley, with particularly African Chop House, he was always going to a lot of these major events, whether it be the Grammys or NBA All-Star, and there would be a whole bunch of events that were targeted towards people that didn't necessarily look like him. And in places like NBA, it's pretty alarming, right? Because there's so many of us that are so invested in the NBA, and from a business structural standpoint, the NBA even has NBA Africa. So it's obvious that there is some sort of set incentive for the NBA to be investing in Africa, but yet in our own grounds on the American soil, they're not really creating the space for us. So Stanley decided to create that space on his own, and African Chop House has now grown to something that is a business. It didn't start that way intentionally. At first, it was just something to serve the community and to create a space for all of us where we can feel comfortable and we can enjoy food that we like, enjoy music that we like. But it has essentially grown into a business because when there is a demand for something, the business can easily be sustained. And it also attracts other brands or sponsors that are looking to tap into that particular audience and into that target demo. So it really works for you when you are meeting the people where they're at, but also identifying that area of opportunity where there is something missing that you can provide and that you have the credibility to create. We also see this in the remainder of our episodes. For example, with Scotty of Las Lap, he wanted a space where we could all feel comfortable and just feel like home, whether that was after the club or after we went out with our friends. But there was always that last spot where you're not ready to end the night, but you also don't want to go to a dive bar either. You want to go to somewhere that feels comfortable, where it feels like you can chill with the homies, get a great cocktail, maybe a little bite to eat. And that's exactly what he created with Last Lap. And that is the intention in its name as well, right? The last of the lap. If you Trini, you know. But that's exactly what it ended up to be. And he found that opportunity within the market because, as we all know, New York is a very saturated market when it comes to restaurants, cocktail bars, etc. But what is that after spot? And that's the hole that Scotty and his team filled. Now with Alex, she found that yes, there's a whole bunch of food recipes out there, but not all of them are very flavor filled, right? Like even me, when I go to Google something on the internet for a recipe, I find myself typing in Black recipes or recipes for the Caribbean people or whatever the case is. That's a lie because no real Caribbean says Caribbean people. But I say that to say she found a hole in the market where there weren't really recipes for us. And if there were, maybe it's something like oxtail that takes all day to make, or homemade soup that takes all day to make. And the modern Black woman, we don't have time like that. We all have jobs, one, if not two, if not three. So the last thing that we can do is sit home and make a meal all day. So she's found that niche where she's providing quick and easy but very tasteful recipes to women and men too, we won't discriminate, but to people who are looking for those quick recipes that are still healthy but still taste really, really good. And then for Dan, through his experience, he realized through all of his experience at all of those amazing Michelin star restaurants that have all of the awards and all of the fancy people coming through the doors, the essence that was missing was the storytelling, was the creativity, was the intimacy between people, especially within those high achieving people or those celebrities that are coming in, because they kind of get bogged down with some of that jadedness, right? So what Dan has done a really good job of really taking all of his experience from the Michelin star restaurants, taking the best of the ingredients, I won't say the recipes because I know he's made his own, but ensuring that each dish is different. In a Michelin star restaurant, you have to follow those recipes to the T. And he's done the exact opposite, where none of his menus will ever be the same. In fact, if you are a client of Dan's, he will tell you that you are not allowed to make your own menu. He likes to interview you, understand your story, and all of those foods that bring up all of those memories. I know when you smell a certain food or when you taste a certain food, it brings you right back to a very specific memory, whether that's in your grandma's kitchen or in your mom's arms or in your uncle's backyard. And those are the experiences that he likes to replicate. So he found that with all of the repetitiveness and all of the fast-paced environments of New York, that slow pace, storytelling, personalized food experience was what was missing. And that's exactly where Dan showed up. So all in all, find a hole within your market. Ideally, a market or a community that you're a part of, because again, it'll save you so much research or so much time trying to understand that market. Whereas if you're already a part of it, you and your friends, you have the market research. You are the market research. You can test your product, test your food with your friends, with your family, so that before you get to the actual market, you already have a product that is tried and tested, and you already will ideally begin to start to curate a group of people within your network, within your circle, that will become essentially your brand fans and will start to do your marketing by word of mouth for you. Of course, in addition to your own digital marketing. The second step is to start with what you have. Use the resources. Start where you are. Sometimes when we get this big idea, the first thing that we want to do is go to the internet, do all of the research in the world, which is great, and you should do that. But sometimes that can become really inundating, and you can become so overwhelmed with the information, or people saying you need $100,000 to start this, you need a 10-person team in order to get this started, and you can feel so overwhelmed. And that's normally when the refusal to call normally starts to happen within the hero journey, because you feel like, okay, I'm not equipped for this. I'm not the person for this. I don't have half of these resources that the internet is telling me to do. But what we also have to remember is that sometimes that research can be so inundating and it's not applicable to us. We are all endowed with our own special gifts and our own special skills that are particular to our journey and to our purpose that we are called for, of what we're here for. So start with what you have. There is a quote from Martin Luther King that I love to refer to, and he says, take the first step. You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. A lot of the times what happens is once you do take that first step, that's when the rest of the plan starts to unfold. And we see this in many of our episodes throughout the season. One of my favorite ones is from Midi, where he mentions he was negative in his bank account and he was operating with his team. They were meeting and meeting and meeting, and they were doing months of meetings to try to plan out how are we going to roll out this Wagyu chopped cheese. It's only one product. We have to make sure that we do it right. Once we launch, what is the next step? Then what is the next step? Then what is the next step? And they actually got called out by their girlfriends saying, you guys are taking all of these meetings. When are you guys going to actually put this into place? Where is the action? And that was the triggering point for them, where they were like, okay, you know what? You're right. Let's just launch this thing and see where it goes. So they made one sandwich. They took photos of it and they posted it on Instagram saying, we're open for business. We're open for pre-orders. Put your orders in now. 48 hours later, someone within their network reached out and said, I love what you guys are doing. This product seems so amazing. Where are you guys cooking these sandwiches out of? And they were like, we figured we're going to do it in our kitchen. She said, you know what? It's COVID. My restaurant is shut down. You can use my restaurant tiered kitchen. They would not have gotten that opportunity if they didn't put themselves out there. If they said, you know what, we're not going to start until we have a kitchen that is up to par based off of the Wagyu that we need and the ciabatta and all of whatever the research would have probably told them, they would have never gotten that opportunity. Now, this also goes for your network too. And starting a business can be really interesting because you're not at the space where you feel like you have something to brag about or something to market per se, especially if you haven't sold anything yet. So you're kind of in this cart before the wheel, or I'm sorry, putting the horse before the cart? No, putting the cart before the horse. You get into the space where you feel like you're putting the cart before the horse, but you don't want to lean on your network because you don't want to ask people for things. I know we all go through that, where the last thing you want to do is ask your network, ask your friends, ask your family for anything, really. I mean, and I might just be projecting, but I can say that that's me. However, you have to put yourself out there. Don't think about it as you. Think about it as your business, and think about it as your baby. You would do anything for your baby. So the importance of tapping into your network is so imperative because you have no idea the resources that are available to you until you start to network that thing, whether by word of mouth or social media, or just telling your friends like, hey guys, I'm starting this business, just letting you know. You don't even have to ask for anything, but people that believe in the vision will automatically offer their resources. And we've seen that in a plethora of the episodes that we've discussed. In one of the particular episodes, I love this example, but in Dan Sabia's episode, he hosted his first 50-person dinner, and it was an intimate dinner, and he wasn't ready per se. He had a whole bunch of shit that was missing. Like, I think it was super cold and he forgot heaters, and there's a whole bunch of things that, when you just don't know, you don't know. However, the result of that dinner single-handedly started so many independent conversations and partnerships that he now has to this day, years and years later, just from that 150-person dinner. And I would love to reiterate a quote that he said in the midst of our pod. He said, "It all happened that night." And the beauty of that was knowing that I had the power to create a space that was so inspirational and so open and free and relaxing that people could be the best versions of themselves. That dinner single-handedly started so many conversations, which led to business propositions, which led to partnerships that still exist today that I would be indebted to. We also see an example of it with Midi. Now, you will honestly see these examples all throughout Midi's episode. He talks about just how, honestly, I think every step of Shmackwich where they were taking another leap into another space as a business has been directly fostered from a conversation that he was having through networking. That's also just the power of New York City. You can be sitting next to someone at a bar who owns a market or owns a food distribution or owns a liquor license that they want to transfer to you. That was part of Scotty's story. But you just never know. And that's why the power of starting is so important, because as soon as you start to get excited about this idea. And then you start to tell people, whether you're friends or whether you're just having a conversation in a bar where now you're getting excited about it. And then guess what? Those people that you're talking to are going to get excited and believe in the brand as well and want to invest with whatever resources they have. And 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be an actual business deal where you're going to have to give money, but when those opportunities organically pop up, it's because people are genuinely intrigued or genuinely invested into your business or into your vision, and they want to just contribute. And it sounds like it's, I was going to say hoopla, I don't think that's the right word, but it sounds like it's taboo. Or it sounds like something that may just start or just happen in movies, or, oh, that just happens to that person, that won't happen to me. This has happened in literally every single episode of these podcasts. So probability is it'll likely happen for you as well. And this is where we'll get into like the spiritual and like mental manifestations of things. But when you truly believe in something and you're putting that energy out there, that energy by physical law, it will be reciprocated to you. So you're only going to start to build that momentum by just taking that first step. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step. Third very important part is the importance of a brand. A brand is literally all of the leverage that you have. You have to build a brand before you can even begin to thinking about building a business. And building a business is more so like the operational aspects, the tactical aspects. What is the rollout? What are the investors? Am I going to do an LLC? Am I going to do an S Corp? All of that is so important in terms of financials, but a brand is what will not only get you launched, but will help you to be sustained, to ensure that people have bought in and that you've created something that, one, the community actually wants, and two, you will actually be able to get a profit from. Now, if you are going the investor route, which we'll get to down the line, profit is very important because you want to ensure that you can not only pay your investors back, but once you pay your investors back, then you'll be able to pay yourself back. You don't want to be operating in your passion and what you think is your life's purpose and be broke. That's not what the universe or God has intended for us. We are intended to live in abundance. But the important part of that, as I digress, is the importance of a brand. And Scotty says it really well, where he says investment requires a solid proof of concept. So before you can even get other people to buy into your brand, you have to have proof of concept. And a lot of the times what that includes is not only building something that is unique and is a differentiator within the market, but also something where it is tested against other competitors. So that could be getting comps in your area, and we'll go into that in depth in a little bit later. But also just ensuring that you have a place within the market that no one else can fill. So once you identify what your brand is, and this can be anything from a product to a feeling to a space to a niche community, whatever that is, that your brand is, that you are selling to your audience, to yourself, to your investors, get really, really granular on what that is to ensure that it can be bought by, again, not only your target audience, but in investors. And you have to be so confident in it, because at the end of the day, if you do decide to pitch to investors or do a Series A round or even family and friends, people are not only buying into the idea and into the business, but they're also buying into you. Because at the end of the day, a business idea can be as good as it can be, as good as you want it to be. But at the end of the day, the CEO or the founder or the leader is the one that's going to get that business idea over to the finish line. There's so many great businesses that are started and even more that fail. And that in part has to do with lack of consistency or lack of discipline or lack of even being a charismatic leader, right? Because being a charismatic leader is very, very important to ensure that you can also train your team and ensure that you are passing on that energy to those who can sustain your business beyond you. And that's what will allow your business to not just stay within the confines of you and your brain, but also be able to scale. And at the end of the day, scalability equates to profitability. So that's a very important part of the process as well. And the charismatic part and building your team might seem like a tiny tactical approach that would be a nice to have, but it really is so imperative in terms of building and scaling your business. And we see two great examples of this in both Dan and Scotty's episodes. In Scotty's episode, in terms of Las Lap, as I mentioned, Las Lap is one of those places where you go in and everyone knows your name. Now, in order for that to be successful with just Scotty would have to be there 24/7 in order for everyone to feel that personalization and for everyone to feel like they're family there. However, he's done a really intentional job of training his staff and intentionally choosing his staff who are hard workers. Dan Sabia did the same exact thing. They've both said that they don't necessarily hire for skill set, although that's important. What's most important is how hardworking you are and what your discipline is. Are you going to show up on time? Are you someone who frequently calls out? And although you can't necessarily tell this within the interview process, you can easily sniff this out in the training process. And this is where you really want to put your potential team members through the ringer to see what their true character is, because the character is what will ensure that your business sustains when you may not be able to be at an event because you have to be somewhere else, whether with a high business client or at the computer doing work. So we have this example with Scotty and Easy. If you guys are familiar with Las Lap, Easy is the homie. Easy is essentially, you might mistake him for the owner at this point, but every time I walk in, Easy is giving me a shot. Easy is saying, "What's up?" Like, it just literally feels like he is my best friend. And although we don't hang out outside of Las Lap, every time I walk into Lap, we literally become besties. And that is something that Scotty intentionally trains within his staff, because again, at the end of the day, if everyone is able to refer to it as the Black Cheers, where everyone knows your name, then everyone has to know your name, not just the owner. Same thing with Dan. Dan has this particular story where he actually implored his business partner at one of their first events, and I would love to directly quote him for this one, where he said to his business partner, not a waiter, not a chef, not anyone else, but his business partner, saying, "I need you to go around every 15 minutes and tell everyone that they're doing a great job and that they need to drink water." And she took it so seriously. And then it turned into an entire year of her saying that to everyone. And we just created this world where it was like there was no stress here. Everyone's doing a great job. And if something does go wrong, who gives a fuck? Because at the end of the day, the excellence is in our food, and that's what will save us. Now, that's interesting coming from someone who's a perfectionist, but perfection comes in different ways. Perfection isn't everything being exactly in its place. Sometimes perfection is the cool side of a pillow. Perfection is the ice cold glass of water. Perfection is the squeeze of lemon over the top of zucchini. Perfection is something that can be as simple as you're doing a great job today. And sometimes you may not always feel that perfection internally when you're in the thick of it, right? As we all know, the food in the culinary space can be very, very fast-paced. It's a service industry at the end of the day, so people want what they want, when they want it, and they want it now, and they want it quick. And then sometimes when you're making a very delicate, intentionally built meal, that doesn't always is conducive with that fast-paced environment when you're trying to really serve personalization and intentionality. But if you do fuck up, at the end of the day, realize where it is your audience is looking for you to be excellent and give yourself grace in those other places where you can't. But in order to ensure that you don't have to be everywhere at all times because it's not feasible, ensure that you are training your staff in a way where they can essentially be you. And this takes confidence because you are essentially kind of giving some of your power away. Not technically, but it may feel that way. You're only making yourself more powerful the more you are creating and essentially duplicating yourself, because the more yous you create, the higher up you can go and the more you can focus on strategy and scaling and building versus just maintaining the business. Okay, so the fourth thing we're going to cover is affordable or low-cost approaches to getting started within the culinary industry. And we're going to go through 3 approaches that we covered within this season's episodes. The first is the pre-order model. The second is collaborations, or what I'm personally calling the impossible burger approach. And the third is content creation, something that we all know and love and are familiar with. So the first is the pre-order model. And this one is really interesting to me, and we really talk about it in depth with Midi's episode of Shmackwich. But I love this model because it allows you to not come out of pocket at all. Essentially, all you're doing is maybe have one model or create one product, photograph it really well, and market that online. And what that allows you to do is see the demand that you have for your audience, how many people are interested in buying this product, but also they're paying for it up front. So whether you allow a week or a month or 2 weeks to allow people to put their orders in, then you can then take that money and buy your materials that you know you're going to need, and you won't have anything remaining. You won't have any losses because you know exactly how many orders you're getting. You already got paid for those, and so you're also not coming out of pocket. You're also getting your profit straight up front. So you allow that. You can either use that as profits to get put back into the business, or let's say you're in the beginning and you have some debts to cover because of whatever startups that you needed. This model is really perfect and a really accessible way to get started in the business. And it also allows you to save money to then make additional steps that you potentially want to take in your business, whether that's opening a brick and mortar or starting a food truck or putting more dollars in marketing. It allows you to just be so much more flexible with your spending and not come so much out of pocket if you don't necessarily have the means to. So the next is the collaboration approach. And this one is really creative too. And again, this is one that I'm personally calling and branding the impossible burger approach, because this is a model that I think we're all pretty familiar with. But it's essentially creating one very niche product that maybe most restaurants or most event spaces or whomever don't necessarily have on their menu, but there is a demand for it as of right now. And we've seen this with the impossible burger. most places, when the vegan crave was happening and kind of still is happening, most people don't have the means to just all of a sudden add a whole vegan item to their menu because one, they don't understand the demand that their particular audience has for it. And if you're at a restaurant, 9 times out of 10, you have to order things in bulk. And if you don't have the demand, you're likely going to take a big loss on whatever that bulk order has if you don't go through the entirety of it. So what a collaboration model allows you to do is to invest in one particular company that specializes in this niche product that has a demand for it thus far and allows you to sell that without little to minimum loss. So you don't have to necessarily have that item permanently on your menu for, let's say, 2 to 3 months or however much the venue holds you to contractually, but you can make a contract with this one particular vendor that allows you to introduce that product to your audience. Now you're bringing in new audience to through your doors because you have a new menu, not a new menu, but a new menu item that you can now market and bring some excitement through your doors to your customers. And then on the flip side, that newer upcoming business now has an opportunity to showcase its product to various markets. And this can be really fun, right? Because you can try this out with different restaurants and restaurants that you know have a certain target demographic, so you can see which target demographic is starting to attract to your product. So this allows you to really test your product before you go out on your own or open your own venue or your own food truck where you now have overhead. So now you see exactly who is liking your product. Maybe you can also test the ingredients of your product, see what's working, see what's not, with a very, very low risk. And so this is really a win-win for both ends. So very creative, love this approach, and a very accessible way to not only test your product, but again, to see who exactly your target demo is and to get really granular on that before 100% launching on your own. Now, third, but certainly not least, is content creation. I love content creation. We all love content creation. We're all on social media all of the time. I love this because unlike opening in a physical space, you can capture such a wider net of an audience that isn't just in New York or isn't just in LA, but you can really reach such a wide audience with and really create a community. And these days, communities are gold. If you have a community, if you have an audience, these are the things that you can actually sell and use as a leverage for when you're looking to get sponsorship dollars or if you're looking to collaborate with a brand. If we are talking about the collaboration model that I just recently mentioned, and you have a strong online community, that is a proof point that you can then take to a restaurant and say, hey, look, I have this amount of people that has engaged with my brand and has shown interest in my brand. This is the type of community that is loyal to my product that I can then bring through your doors. Or if you are looking to host a pop-up event before you open your first brick and mortar and you're looking for sponsors and partners, again, the community that you've built online that really takes no money to build, you can then use that as leverage and take that to your sponsors or your partners and say, this is the amount of people that I have invested in this business. Ideally, if your sponsor or your partner has that same target audience, then that is a selling point for them where you're giving them the access to that audience that they're looking to specifically target. And so again, win-win, because all of business is really about creating win-win scenarios. You have to provide value in order to get value. And that's referring back to one of our main imperative tactics is to building that brand. So once you do have that brand, if you're able to create that online community and then leverage that against to build more equity and more leverage, that is the key point to taking that next step once you've started out. Okay, so getting into the fifth topic, creating value or raising money. The important stuff, the heavy hitting stuff. Now, value and money are essentially one and the same. You can't raise money, you can't ask for money if you can't show the value of what your company has, or what your company has to offer, rather. So, creating value, if you prefer not to raise money, I know a lot of us, that's a scary, scary thing, whether it's taking a loan out from a bank or asking investors for money or even asking friends and family for money. That pre-order model will be your godsend. It's something where you can really track how well your company is doing without any major risks. And it also allows you to safely and responsibly curate a bank of profits that you can then take and invest into, whether a pre-leasing model or whatever the case is, and we'll get into that in the brick and mortar section. This does take more time than getting a lump sum of money up front. However, it is something that feels a little bit more safe, and I can understand that that's something that, especially if this is your first business, that's something that could be at the top of mind for you. No one wants to owe money back to anyone, not a bank, not a person, especially not your family or your friends. It can be a very sticky situation. So if this is something that you want to just initially gauge the taste of your audience and of your demographic, highly recommend. Another way to create value is to start with those pop-ups with those brands and those sponsors that I mentioned. Attaching yourself to a major brand that people are already familiar with, that recognition can automatically give your company credibility, especially if it's a brand that people are already loyal to, that already like, that already have a credibility within their homes, within their hearts. It's amazing what a collaboration can do in terms of automatically giving that cosign to your brand. And this really helps with not only building the brand, but also widening your audience and tapping into that brand or that sponsor's audience. Now, you may be asking, how do I show to these brands or these sponsors the value of my company, especially if I'm just getting started? I have nothing to show. Stanley does a really good job of explaining how to essentially put a deck together for your brand so that you can show to these companies what your value is and what you bring to the table. Overall, he describes it in 3 steps. 1, identify what it is you have to offer. 2, identify what these brands need or want, because again, it has to be a win-win. 3, where do you guys meet in the middle, or what he calls the Venn diagram of connectivity? So what is it that you provide? What is it that they provide? And how can you ensure that you're creating a niche experience for both of your audiences, wherever those audiences overlap? That has to be the middle of the Venn diagram, wherever that overlap is. Tune in and hone into that and amplify that within your event or your collaboration or partnership, whether that be digital or in real life. Now, if your preference is to get that lump sum of money up front, you have 2 ways that you can go about this. You can go about it by getting a business loan, where first you would have to have all of your infrastructure set up in terms of LLC, S Corp, or whatever direction you prefer to go in. Dan Sabia does a really good job of breaking down the benefits of each in our episode with him. Or you can go the family and friends investment rounds, where could get a little dicey, but if done right, can be very, very formidable and very fun, because now you're investing in a company, you're building a company with some of the people who believe in you the most. And this is the approach that both Stan and Scotty took. And they talk about it in depth in both of our episodes. And they've both given some really insightful insights based off of their experiences. So you only want to go this route if you have a strong network of family and friends that also have some significant income. If your family and friends aren't doing too well financially, I don't suggest this approach for you. But if you have some skin in the game where your family or friends are making a decent amount of money and they have some funds that they are willing to give, this can be a really, really lucrative opportunity for you. Now, in order to do this, you have to approach it right, because we don't want any relationships getting soured over any business deals. So for the family and friends approach, you can either take the approach where you're giving out a certain percentage of equity, or you can take the model where your family and friends are making money as the business makes money. And you honestly want to do a combination of these two, because before you even start out with giving equity, you want to align with your partners on how much equity you guys are going to give out in totality. Because what you don't want to happen is by the time you turn around and you guys start making money, you've given out all of your equity and now you're not even majority stakeholders in your own business, which means you don't have decision-making control. So you want to ensure that the owners retain a majority of the equity so that you retain decision-making power. So put a cap on how much equity that you're going to give out and be very intentional with how much percentage and who you are giving that equity to. A very strategic thing that Stanley suggests in his episode is if you can't afford a major position that you need in your company in order to get started, maybe consider saving a piece of equity for that person. For an example, like a lawyer or an accountant. Those two positions can be very, very pricey for a good one, but they're also very imperative to ensuring the success of your business. So if that's something that you need, which if you're starting in the culinary industry, you're going to need, then you want to ensure, or easy way rather, to ensure that you have someone who is credible and is a master in their field, but might be a little bit costly. Maybe give them a little bit of equity in return. Now, to the point of accountant and attorneys, before you even embark on the family and friends investment rounds, you want to ensure that you have both an accountant and an attorney when you are going into this. Because one, you want to ensure that you have proper contracts to ensure that your business is protected, and so that your friends and families who are invested also feel protected and like this is a real business. Sometimes when you're dealing with family or friends and they know you for just being the 9 to 5 you, or especially with family, they may know you as being the little 14-year-old Savannah who is playing with Barbie dolls. Okay, I wasn't playing with Barbie dolls at 14, but you get the picture. Sometimes they may not really take you seriously, and sometimes things can just be exchanged casually, colloquially, in passing conversations. So you want to ensure that all of those things are really formalized on paper so that both parties are aware of what's happening. You guys both agree to what is being invested and what is being returned, and so that your family and friends are taking you seriously. Now, to that same point, before you even go into these investment rounds, as we mentioned in Scotty's episode, you want to have proof of concept. And this will help to build your case for what I just mentioned of having your family and friends take you seriously. And you can have proof of concept in numerous ways. There's comps, where the same thing, if anyone out there has bought a house or has invested in real estate, when you're looking to get a house, you ask your realtor for comps. And what comps are essentially, okay, what is all the other real estate or all the other buildings in this area, how much are they going for based off of how many bedrooms they have, how many bathrooms, and which block are they on? Are they across the street from the park? It helps you to compare based off of the price that you're being offered compared to the prices that currently exist in that same demographic or that same target area. So in the restaurant world, what a comp looks like is how many people are coming in the area for drinks? How many drinks are they buying? How much do the drinks cost? What is the foot traffic? And all of that allows you to have proof points within the area that you're looking to invest in so that your investors feel comfortable that there's going to be foot traffic. There's proof points of the average of how much that person spends. So you can use those numbers and say, okay, this is going to be the average or at least the minimum of what I can guarantee that this business is going to make. So I have a proof point that although this business does not exist yet, this is the very least of success that it can do based off of everything else in the area. And of course, you're going to do better than those businesses because you have a niche idea and you have a strong brand that you've built. But to your investors who may be wary and are going to be investing a lot of money in you, ideally, You want to ensure that they feel confident in their investment and that they're happy to invest with you, because a happy relationship will make for just a better relationship in any capacity. Now, in terms of content creation, we're all familiar with the models of getting paid out from YouTube ad revenues, from Spotify, from Instagram, or getting sponsorship dollars from partnerships and things of that nature. But I implore you to take a further look on how you can further monetize your content from a subscription-based model. And Alex Hill does a really great job of this. There's platforms like Substack and Patreon that allow you to create additional content that you can sell to your readers on a subscription model base, whether this is monthly, whether it's weekly, or whatever the case is. And this can be something that is in addition to the content that you're already putting out on those major platforms that will capture a wide array of audience and kind of be your marketing to capture new audiences. But for those loyal subscribers that are invested in you and that are already sold in, how can you further sell to them? How can you give them more of what they're already liking? And it's a really great idea to use the content that you already have, maybe do a deeper dive on it, like how I'm doing with this episode here, and use that as added value to then sell to your subscribers who want further insights or want additional information, whether it be personal information about you, how to go deeper into this recipe, or making a side dish of a main dish. And there's so many different creative ways that you can go about this, but it's a really creative and great way to create additional monetary value and also bring in extra income for your business. So topic number 6, now that you've established your brand, you've raised all the money that you've needed to raise, you are well established, ideally, amongst your community and amongst your target demographic, it's time to open a brick and mortar. And you really do want to wait for this, because a brick and mortar is a lot of overhead. And the more you contribute to that overhead, the less profit in your pockets, the less profit you can then pay back to investors. So before I even get to the tactics of opening a brick and mortar and the different approaches that you can take to do that, I want to implore you to ensure that you have properly tested your product. And this is so important because, as I mentioned, once you open that brick and mortar where you are inherently and immediately taking on that overhead and paying that money out, you want to ensure that you have optimized the amount of foot traffic that will go through there and the amount of people that are going to pay money for your product or for your food. And the idea of testing out your product is not just about perfecting your product, although that is a very important part of it, but it also allows you to start socializing your brands with intimate circles and your target demographic before you even open those doors, to ensure that when those doors do open, you already have the demand that is feeding that bottom line to ensure that you are meeting your profit. Now, there's 3 ways that you can take this approach. A couple of them we've already discussed in this podcast, but the first is collabing with local restaurants or bars. The second is doing local pop-ups, whether that's standalones or in conjunction with major events or parties in your local city, ideally one that is aligned with the audience that you are trying to reach so you can see live reactions in real time. And the third is intimate tasting dinners. And this is one of my favorites because you have the opportunity to curate a mini version of what you're looking to ideally open. And it doesn't have to be necessarily within the space. Ideally, it won't be within the space because you want to do this before you even invest in the brick and mortar. But you can do this with Airbnbs, in your own home, in peer spaces, at a friend's home that maybe wants to have a birthday dinner and you offer to provide the food for a tasting dinner, which not only allows you to taste your product or try your product rather, but it also allows your friends to give their friends an exclusive opportunity, tasting dinner for a new restaurant that hasn't even opened yet. It's all about how you market and position things. So really implore you to try and test out your product first. Again, not only so that you can perfect it so that once doors open, you have as much of smooth sailing as possible, but second, so that you also get people to start to talk about your business and start to spread your business by word of mouth before your doors even open. So ideally, now that you have perfected your menu and your brand has already begun to socialize within your target demographic, you are ready to open your brick and mortar. And there's a few approaches that you can take to this. There is the leasing opportunity where you can operate within a food market venue. There's many of these within New York, many of them within LA. I'm not familiar with any of the non-major cities, but vendor markets are a great opportunity for you to get started. And this is essentially kind of the equivalent of a food truck, but it allows you to be within a venue that ideally you'd be conducting percentage splits with. And this is similar to the pre-order model business where you won't be coming out of pocket. Now, each contract is different and each negotiation is different. However, I'm just telling you that this approach is possible, and we do talk about it in our episode with Midi. This is the contract that he has with Ali Market in Chelsea, where whatever amount of profit he makes, he has agreed to a certain percentage split to give a percentage of those profits back to Ali Market. Now, this is different where a food truck, where Scotty started New York chopped cheese out in LA and tested it out with a food truck first. And he did that because he wanted to test out the market. He wanted to see if that area was had the proper demand for the food that he was looking to sell. And once he had proof of concept with the food truck in LA with New York chopped cheese, then that's when he opened Linden LA, which is the proper brick and mortar, and Dot Dot, which is the lounge attached to Linden, that is also technically a brick and mortar, but of course for cocktails, more so like a club type vibe. Highly recommend if you're out in LA. Great vibes. And then last but certainly not least, if you've raised enough money and God has blessed you so that you can open up your own brick and mortar straight from jump, then of course, go ahead. But again, you want to ensure that you have your product and your menu and your operations as granular and uptight as possible so that when doors do open, everything is smooth sailing. Because sometimes, unfortunately, all it takes is 1 to 2 bad customers to tank your business, especially in the beginning when a lot of your marketing is going to be word of mouth. So if you do end up doing straight brick and mortar opening without doing a food truck or without leasing within a food market vendor beforehand, then I would implore you to do at least 1 to 2 soft openings where you are allowing your staff, allowing your chef, and allowing people you trust to taste the menu, experience the operations, give live feedback. If you do a soft opening, you have to have live feedback, whether that's written on traditional pen and paper or a survey at the end of the night. And you can offer the meal complimentary in exchange for people's feedback, so that if anything does essentially go wrong or they didn't necessarily like anything, it's not like they had to come out of pocket. So there'll be a lot more understanding. And again, win-win. Free meal, you're getting feedback, and then invite them to the actual launch where now they actually feel like they've been a part of building something and contributing to something. So now they feel like they have skin in the game, and maybe they feel like it's a little bit of their restaurant too, and they'll invite their friends to the launch. But a very strategic approach to ensure that you're still getting everything that you need right with people that you trust without the word getting out from a bad customer or a bad review that'll stay on your Google review or on Yelp review for, unfortunately, ever. Topic number 7, last but certainly not least, is the importance of being able to change or pivot. When things don't work out, or when we have a very particular and specific vision in our head, it can be really frustrating, underwhelming, and honestly just disappointing if it doesn't pan out in the exact way that we envisioned it. However, as I mentioned at the top of this, You weren't intended to see the full staircase. You were just intended to take the first step. And that was intended to embark you on this journey. What the destination is, you don't always necessarily know. And we've seen this in so many successful, hugely successful businesses. Coca-Cola started as a medicinal drink. And now the last thing you think when you think Coca-Cola is anything healthy or anything medicinal. We can even apply this to cell phones. The original thought of cell phones was to ensure that anyone can call you at any point of time in the day. And now the last thing I want to use my phone for is phone calls. You can text me, maybe even FaceTime. Mainly, I use my cell phone for my camera. We also see this in current day. We've seen this in a majority of our episodes from this season. Scotty's original idea for Last Lap was for it to be a lounge with cocktails. He didn't want food to be involved because he felt like if you want to make money in New York City, just sell drinks, sell good cocktails, have it just be a really great lounge where we can all just hang out. And now I literally go to Last Lap for those jerk chicken spring rolls. They're honestly my favorite. And maybe I'll have a drink or two. Same thing with Stanley and his business. He didn't even want African Chop House to be a business. It was just supposed to be something that was intimate for the community. And now he has people that are definitely not part of the diaspora who are showing up to African Chop House, and it's something that's so beautiful. Something that he quotes in his episode was, instead of it being for us, by us, it's now for all by us. And that's the exact approach that we should be taking as people of our community. And Dan Sabia with Wood Fire Co. He originally started as intimate gatherings at people's homes, especially during COVID. It thrived in that business. But once COVID ended and people wanted to be around others, they wanted to get out of their houses, he had to pivot his business plan. So then he pivoted to catering weddings and catering major events and being out in the streets. And this is literally the importance of pivoting and being innovative with the markets, because there's going to be different demands as your business grows, as your demographic grows, and as technology varies. So you have to ensure that you're able to pivot and be with the times, because that's what's essentially going to keep your business sustainable as long as you keep that brand at the core of it. So with that, we have gone through all of the 7 high-level approaches of course, not all-encompassing, but the really imperative things that's needed to not only start a culinary business, but to start any successful business. And if you haven't watched any of those episodes and you want a deeper dive into anything that we've discussed today, I highly implore you to go back and watch the specific episodes that were mentioned. But until then, I'll see you guys in season 2. Thank you for joining.